Lewis takes your questions on Good Morning Britain tomorrow from 6. Emmerdale's Charles actor Kevin Matherin joins Lorraine at 9. Lily Allen and Freema Agyeman tell us about their new comedy on This Morning from 10. And Adrian Childs drops in to see The Loose Women at 12:30. Now the latest ITV News in the Tyne region with Lea and Ian Payne.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to ITV News Tyne Tees. Tonight's headlines.
NHS dental charges going up as dentists leave the service and patients go without NHS treatment.
As a dentist, I'm looking in their mouths and I'm mortified at what I'm seeing. These people haven't seen a dentist for 20, 30 years.
Also tonight, the Environment Secretary under pressure again from MPs over the dead shellfish that washed up along the region's coast.
There are calls for spiking to be made a specific offence, with many victims hesitating to come forward.
And Darlington's former world boxing champion Stuart Hall has a new fight on his hands as he tries to help youngsters who are struggling at school.
Boxing, it definitely saved my life, and I'm so glad that I went on and won a world title, because I wouldn't be here talking to you now and I wouldn't be able to be working with these kids.
First tonight, it's hard enough to find an NHS dentist and charges for treatment are going up from next month.
The British Dental Association says that will hit patients on modest incomes. The government says there's been no increase in NHS charges for 2 years, whilst the cost of treatment, they say, has risen.
NHS dentistry is already in crisis, with more than 11 million people unable to get an appointment. The BDA says that's only going to get worse, with research this month showing that more than half of dentists are leaving or reducing their NHS work.
The impact on patients is, of course, stark. One woman from Teesside who couldn't get an appointment says she was reduced to eating baby food after her teeth became so decayed they began to fall out. There are calls for the government to deliver urgent reform, as Julie Harrison reports.
Debbie Fleming was left unable to eat solid food after years of dental neglect. These x-rays show her mouth before treatment. Missing and broken teeth, an abscess and gum disease. Debbie had become reclusive, embarrassed by her appearance.
I'd lost a considerable amount of weight, 10 kilograms in weight. I was struggling to eat. My mental health was very, very low. Basically, physically I was a mess and I needed help.
As Debbie's dental problems continued, she developed a phobia of dentists and had to have therapy to get her to a position where she could even begin treatment. Eventually, Debbie found Emma Green at Grange Dental Practice, who has spent the last year helping her get to the point where she can smile again.
She promised me that I would be able to smile for my birthday, and she did it.
Everything feel okay?
Emma Green concentrates mainly on NHS dentistry, but due to the way the government funds the work, she can be left out of pocket with some patients. Like many dental practices, Emma's doesn't accept new NHS patients, but they will help with emergency cases.
As a dentist, I'm looking in their mouths and I'm mortified at what I'm seeing. These people haven't seen a dentist for 20, 30 years. If we had funding available, we would be able to say, come back next week, we will sort all this out for you, but we can't. And we want to. I want to be an NHS dentist. I want to sort the pain out. I want to get rid of the abscesses. I want to, do all this.
The British Dental Association says the unmet need for NHS dentistry is at a record high, currently 1 in 4 of adults. On top of that, all dentists have cut back NHS work, mainly due to the way it's funded by the government.
I've got one case I'm thinking of in particular where the current hourly rate the dentist is making is £9.90 per hour. That doesn't fund the nurse that works alongside him, let alone the electricity, the materials, the insurances and all the other expenses we've got.
How would you describe NHS dentistry now?
Dead. Absolutely dead in the water. Patients are finding that 90% of practices are not accepting new patients. So unless you have an NHS dentist, you will massively struggle to find one. The funding is non-existent.
The number of dentists offering NHS treatment in the region is continuing to fall at a rapid rate. According to government figures, the Newcastle and Gateshead Clinical Commissioning Group area has seen one of the biggest falls in the number of dentists providing the service, with now only 59 for every 100,000 people.
I've had so many constituents get in touch with me, worried parents whose children are 4 or 5 and have never seen a dentist. I had one parent who took their child to Turkey for a dental appointment. I've had others who are resorting to DIY surgery. They're so worried for themselves and for their children.
A Department of Health and Social Care spokesman said, "We are working to improve access to NHS dental care by investing more than $3 billion a year in dentistry for all NHS patients, but we know there's more to do. We recently implemented reforms to provide fairer pay for practices to take on high-needs patients." For Debbie, a dedicated dentist has helped her to smile again. But for so many, it's simply something they can only hope for. Julie Harrison, ITV News.
Well, next to the saga involving miles of our coastline that's been running for a year and a half now.
Within the last few hours, a new chapter has been written. The Environment Secretary, Therese Coffey, has faced a grilling from a panel of MPs over the decision to rule out further investigation into what killed off thousands of crustaceans along our shores between October and December in 2021. And there was no sign of any forthcoming U-turn.
Our correspondent Greg Easteel has been monitoring events at that committee for us. And Greg, it's hard to overstate. There will be many that are eager to know the outcome. Well, what can you tell us?
Well, look, you're absolutely right to use that word saga, and it's worth pointing out it's been a painful saga, not least for members of our fishing community who claim to have lost a good chunk of their livelihoods, also for environmentalists, for campaign groups and other organisations who at points have had the finger of suspicion pointed at them. Look, before we hear of what came out of that committee meeting this afternoon, let's remind ourselves of events going into it. This all goes back to those shocking images that we saw in late 2021 of thousands of crabs and other crustaceans washed up on our beaches. Now, initially, one report from DEFRA concluded that algal bloom seemed to be the likely cause. Then there was more testing and other reports carried out by university academics that seemed to suggest that the chemical pyridine might have been a contributing factor. Now, what followed after that? Much conjecture, a lot of campaigning, and then the decision to commission a new panel, a new investigation to look into that die-off. Findings published in January stated they hadn't found any clear or convincing single cause for the deaths. It did find, though, that it was about as likely as not that a pathogen new to UK waters, like a disease or parasite, caused the crustacean mortality. The report said it was unlikely that an algal bloom, blamed at one point for the die-off, was the cause. Theories the chemical pyridine or another toxic pollutant were also dismissed as very unlikely. And crucially, for the future of the Teesside Freeport, the panel ruled that capital dredging, which didn't start until a year after the die-off, was exceptionally unlikely, less than 1% chance to have caused the crabs and lobsters to die. So, earlier this afternoon, their Secretary of State, Dr. Therese Coffey, quizzed by that committee, who began pretty much by asking her specifically whether she stood by that decision not to have any further investigation into that pathogen to find out exactly what it was. Here's what she had to say, no sign of any change of heart.
It was felt like trying to find the Holy Grail and what it could be, and what we did, I made the judgment that we wouldn't try and pursue any further research. However, we did say that we would respond to reports of similar mortality events, and CFAS has not received any reports of similar mortality events.
So, Greg, another key decision was the government's decision not to offer any compensation to those in our fishing industry who say that their income was hit heavily by the die-off.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the Secretary of State was pressed heavily as well at that meeting on that specific point. And the MP, Geraint Davis, talking about how they'd previously heard testimony from families who said they'd been in the business for generations and had even ended up selling their boats because of the damage caused. Here's a taste of that exchange.
That's the end of their living forever. So why is it that you haven't called for the government to provide them some level of compensation, even if this is an act of God, as it were, akin to what happened with the foot and mouth disease episode where farmers were compensated? Are you treating fishermen differently to other people who've had their lives ruined?
In terms of foot and mouth, the government required, as it does on aspects of avian influenza, to kill the animals that were healthy, and compensation was paid for that. In this regard, I understand the concerns of the local fishermen, but in that wider area, there is what has been fed back is that we're not seeing a particular change in aspects of revenues.
Having watched through that committee this afternoon, the overview, I'd say, is that this is a saga which the Secretary of State now seems keen to put a full stop on. The remaining question, of course, is whether that will really turn out to be the case.
OK, Greg, thank you very much for the latest on that.
You're watching ITV News Tyne Tees. Thank you for your company. Still to come on tonight's programme.
The skateboarder training for a new world record in North Yorkshire.
And in the weather, what a difference a day makes. Yes, indeed, the unsettled forecast continues for the rest of the week. It looks like being windy, but also very mild. All the details coming up.
Next, would a new law help stop spiking in pubs? Some pub and club owners certainly think so, and they want the government to introduce one.
Well, spiking is putting alcohol or drugs into another person's drink or indeed their body without their consent or knowledge. Sometimes drinks are tampered with or people are attacked with needles.
Now, figures show there are at least 5,000 cases of spiking every year, although many victims don't come forward. Kevin Ashford reports.
It can turn a night out from fun to frightening, where pub and club goers have their drinks tampered with or they're injected and they become victims of spiking. Cara Sayer had been on a quiet evening out with a friend who'd left earlier than her. Cara believes her drink was spiked. She was found in the bar's toilets.
I don't remember going to the toilets. I don't remember anything after my friend left. I do vaguely remember getting into the ambulance. I don't know how I got to the ambulance. I remember little bits of conversation while I was in the ambulance, and then they took me home. So and that's pretty much it.
The latest figures from police forces show that there were more than 2,000 reports of drinks being spiked in the 12 months up to September last year, with a slightly greater number of cases of spiking by injection, which combined with other means of spiking, such as through food being tampered with, totalled just under 5,000 reports, although it's generally thought the problem is underestimated. The Nighttime Industries Association is among those calling for a specific crime of spiking to make it easier to report. A call backed by the owner of this bar in Durham, who says they're already taking steps to protect customers.
Certainly as a business, we do a lot to help the customers feel safe with preventive measures, lids to go on top of the drinks. But currently, there's no help for businesses. We buy all their measures ourselves, and it costs business a lot of money, especially like in these times. It certainly doesn't help.
The call for a new law is also supported by Cara, who says spiking must be taken more seriously.
I didn't actually leave the house for about a week afterwards, and then it took me another couple of weeks for me to be able to actually go out socially with a friend, and it really knocked my confidence as well. It really made me question my own sanity, like the way that my experience was questioned in a way that made it out that it was my fault, that somehow I had got uncontrollably drunk to a point of being unconscious and not remembering anything about it, was made out to be my fault.
Something more should be done in law about spiking.
MPs have discussed ways of strengthening the law, although the government says a specific offence of spiking isn't necessary. The Safeguarding Minister told ITV, "Spiking is a cowardly act which is already illegal. Anyone who commits this abhorrent crime faces up to 10 years behind bars." A government report on the problem of spiking and how to tackle it is due to be published by the end of next month. Kevin Ashford, ITV News.
Well, sadly, it's believed that stories like Cara's are far from unique, but many organisations want to try and change that. And earlier, I spoke to Dawn Dines from the charity Stamp Out Spiking. Dawn, thanks very much for your time today. First of all, I think it's important to say that there are misconceptions, aren't there, about exactly who spiking can happen to. And I guess the simple answer is it's important to point out it can happen to anybody.
It really can. I mean, spiking has no prejudice at all. It can happen to anybody, anytime and anywhere. We've even had reports of people getting spiked at a funeral recently and at a wedding. So it just goes to show it really can happen to anybody.
I mean, that's quite scary in itself, isn't it, Dawn? And as we heard there in Cara's story from the report, she shared her story with us. There is this misconception about, you know, well, if you might have drunk too much or you put yourself in a position where somehow, you know, you opened yourself up to being spiked. You think that can be really damaging in terms of encouraging people to come forward? And again, those misconceptions around what the impact can actually be.
Yeah, it's so dangerous, these misconceptions. You know, it's been said to me for years now. I've been campaigning for nearly 2 decades against this crime. And the amount of people, even from our key emergency services, that say, oh, you've just had too much to drink. Spiking comes in many different forms. It can be extra alcohol in an alcoholic or a non-alcoholic drink. It's done through injection. We've had reports now that people are spiking vapes. We also know about the needle spiking. So, you know, this doesn't just happen to women either. Spiking happens to men, and it's happening to them every weekend on our streets.
Finally, Dawn, what advice would you give to people who think they might have been spiked? Because I know, again, one of the challenges is not everybody who's spiked comes forward.
Well, we've done a survey at Stamp Out Spiking, and over 97% of victims didn't report this crime to the police. Now, it's absolutely vital. You need to be reporting this data to the police. We need to be able to get a clear picture so that we can go back to the government and we can say to them, what are you doing? We need to adequately train the key emergency services to make sure that people are looked after, and we're going to start gaining convictions that way.
Dawn, I know you've also been campaigning tirelessly for a change in the law. We do really appreciate your time talking to us here today. Dawn Dines, the CEO of Stamp Out Spiking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Later tonight, Raggy Omar has this week's edition of On Assignment.
Tonight, on assignment, Dan Rivers travels to Alice Springs in Australia to ask why so many feel the country continues to fail its Indigenous population. Will a proposed referendum on introducing a permanent Indigenous voice to Parliament be a step towards righting long-standing wrongs? James Mates travels to Portugal to meet campaigners on both sides of a new controversial euthanasia law. And Sangeeta Lal is in Denmark, where researchers have preserved almost 10,000 brains to help future generations better understand dementia and schizophrenia. That's On Assignment after the news.
And the ITV Evening News continues at 6:30 tonight with Mary.
Coming up on the programme, another armed killer in another US school. These were the final moments before Audrey Hale shot dead 6 people, including 3 9-year-old children. We'll have the latest from Nashville. Also on the programme, William Hill is fined for allowing customers to gamble away tens of thousands of pounds in minutes. The stars of Coronation Street on how they prepared for last night's acid attack plotline, and white lips, pale face, singing along with your hero, the Ed Sheeran fan pulled up on stage at one of the pop stars' concerts. We'll do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
The Premier League says it can't comment on whether Newcastle United's ownership is under investigation. Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters was asked by MPs today whether the organisation had launched a new probe into the Magpies. The takeover, backed by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, was given the go-ahead in 2021 after assurances that the Saudi state would not have control of the club. Court documents filed in the USA last month appear to cast fresh doubt on the relationship between the PIF and the Saudi state. And Mr Masters said today the Premier League can't comment at this stage, and he was unable to confirm if an investigation is even taking place.
Shirts worn by Newcastle United during the Carabao Cup final are being auctioned in memory of former player Christian Atsu. The 31-year-old died in a major earthquake that struck across Turkey and Syria in February. Proceeds from the sale of the shirts will go to the British Red Cross appeal.
It is nearly 10 years since Darlington's Stuart Hall became a boxing world champion. These days, the 43-year-old is helping to fight a different battle.
Yeah, Stuart was an unlikely global star who admits he had his share of problems away from the ring. But now he's using all his experiences, the good and the bad, to try to help others, as Simon O'Rourke reports.
Stuart Hall hit the heights as a boxer. Maybe he appreciated that more because he experienced a few lows along the way. That's why he's so enthusiastic about his new project, Ringside Education. It's about harnessing the power of sport to help people who may have lost their way. He's teamed up with the Evolve Sports Academy to develop a local authority-approved alternative education programme for young people who struggle within the mainstream school system.
Where these kids are, I've been there, and I know exactly what most of these kids are going through, because mainstream school's not for every child, you know what I mean? So for me to be able to help in the way that I can, boxing, it definitely saved my life, and I'm so glad that I went on and won a world title, because I wouldn't be here talking to you now, and I wouldn't be able to be working with these kids, trying to find them, like I say, the better path.
What we're going to do today, we're going to do a functional skills task. We'll be working with young people who've been excluded or at risk of exclusion from school. They can work towards recognised qualifications in sports leadership and functional skills. I think sport, has the power to change lives. And I think obviously working with Stuart here and what he's achieved in his hometown of Darlington, I think it's really inspiring for young people.
Nowadays we know him as a world champion and a family man, but Stuart fought his demons when he was younger, which he believes gives him insight into his new role.
I'm a perfect example, Anna. Look at me. I didn't do well at school, I didn't do no GCSEs. As soon as I meet these kids, I interact with them straight away. It's like a connection straight away, because I wasn't the best of kids, you know what I mean, at school, so I know what they're going through.
The Dolphin Centre, where Stuart once won a Commonwealth title, is his hometown base in Darlington, but they've already taken the programme across the region. Of course, Stuart was known across the world. December marks the 10th anniversary of his epic world title win over Vusi Malinga in Leeds. He's one of only 3 North East fighters to ever win a world title.
Well, you interviewed me 10 years ago, didn't you? It was... I don't know. I was speechless when I won the world title. I'm a bit speechless now, because looking back, I forget what I've done. And when I actually do look back at the videos and stuff, it is amazing, do you know what I mean? It's amazing what I've done.
They're not out to find a new world champion boxer, although wouldn't that be great? Stuart Hall just wants to help people find the best of themselves. As a fighter, a champion and a survivor, he might be the perfect role model.
Well, next, if you know an ollie from a nose grind and a kicker from a half pipe, this next piece is for you. We are going skateboarding.
Yes, we are. Not literally, but Ryan Swain is. He's from Malton in North Yorkshire, and he's hoping to set a new world record by covering more than 260 miles in 24 hours.
He's been practising at an airfield near York. Fraser Maud went along.
Elvington Airfield near York has a history of hosting record-breaking attempts involving, well, pretty much everything on wheels, from motorbikes to cars to go-karts to ice cream vans and even a motorised garden shed. But even for Elvington, distance skateboarding is a first, and that's where Ryan comes in.
Obviously park skateboarding, vert skateboarding, street skateboarding, that's all, very well known. Distance skateboarding is becoming a thing in this country. Hopefully I can be a pioneer in that and achieve this world record here at Elvington.
Ryan was diagnosed with adult ADHD when he was 22, so choosing which charity would benefit from his fundraising was easy.
Mind for me has helped me with my own mental health, so it's a personal charity, it's close to my heart, but also it helps millions of people across the country overcome their mental health disorders. So I'm doing this to raise money and awareness, obviously for Mind, but also inspire other people that are maybe enduring a mental health disorder, that you can still achieve your dreams, your goals, your ambitions, and the mental health disorder doesn't define who you are.
The furthest Ryan has skated before is 55 miles. Covering 5 times that distance will be a huge physical and mental challenge. One thing Ryan's going to have to contend with is the good old British weather. The existing record was set in America's Sunshine State, Florida. Here in Elvington at the moment, it's just 2 degrees C. Ryan's attempt will be made in May, so hopefully it'll be a little warmer and he'll have the belief of his family backing him up.
The ADHD and the things in his mind and things with that, he channels them difficulties into what he does with his skateboarding or his things for charity. He always puts it to good, positive things. And he's taught me and his mum a lot about positivity as well. So, yeah, very, 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 very lucky to have him as a son, yeah.
With support like that, he surely can't go wrong. And if this challenge isn't enough, you never know. He might be tempted to try for the longest journey by skateboard. After all, the current record for that is a mere 7,555 miles. Fraser Maud, ITV News, Elvington.
There's a lot of high kicking there, isn't there?
There is, yeah. Good luck with that, Ryan. Time for the weather now. Here's Emma.
Good visibility on the horizon. TUI sponsors ITV Tyne's weather.
Hello there, I hope you managed to keep smiling today in spite of the weather. It really was quite damp and dank and grey and murky out there, and I'm afraid the unsettled weather just continues throughout the rest of the week. Temperatures turning much milder. They should peak on Thursday. They'll settle a couple of degrees above the average. You can see here that they will be well up across the whole of the UK from what they were like yesterday, and then they start to drop back down a little bit by weekend, but only to where they should be for the time of year, around 11 to 13 Celsius, but an isolated 16 is possible in places as we head through to Thursday. Rewinding then to the detail, this is a system that moved through today, leaving behind it some patchy showers. 1 or 2 more heavy showers move through tomorrow. There's an occlusion there, which also brings some joy. And then on Friday, this area of low pressure, a big system from the Atlantic, there is a question mark over that as to how far north it's going to get. I think it will affect our part of the world, though, but more on that nearer the time. Still a few days off yet. Rewinding to the next few hours, the main system and its rain is out of the way to the northeast now, but a few showers follow, some low cloud, patchy drizzle, hill fog around overnight tonight, and the winds falling fairly light, although they will start to get a little bit more lively towards tomorrow morning. Temperatures hold up well. It goes without saying that we're going to be frost free. Into tomorrow, it is quite a grey, damp, dank sort of start to the day. There will be a lot of dryness at times, but then these showers approaching later. I think it's going to be after dark before we get the heaviest of the rain moving through, and also some stronger winds later in the day as that system moves through. And then for Thursday itself, largely dry, but still the risk of a few showers. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors ITV Tyne's weather.
Thank you, Emma. In just a moment, the national and the international news.
I'll see you for the update at around 10:45. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.